Hello, my name is David Stephen Cohen, and this is the Lumbee Last Stand, Part 1. According to their official website, the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina consists of 55,000 members living primarily in Robeson, Hoke, Cumberland, and Scotland counties. They claim to be the largest tribe east of the Mississippi River. During their history, they have been known by several names: the Cheraw, the Croatans, the Cherokee, the Tuscarora, and since the 1950s as the Lumbees. Yet the Lumbees have no reservation, no treaties with the federal government, and no survivals of Indian language, custom, or beliefs. The name comes from the Lumber River, formerly known as Drowning Creek, which runs through southeastern North Carolina as a tributary of the Little Pee River, which in turn flows into the Great Pee River in South Carolina. The Lumbees are in a rather unique situation. They were recognized by the federal government by an act of Congress in 1956, but that act denied them any of the benefits that came from being a federally recognized tribe. The Office of Indian Affairs, that is the OIA, which is today the Bureau of Indian Affairs, opposed the Lumbee Act in 1956 on the grounds that the Lumbees had no treaty with the United States and that the act might impose additional financial burdens on the federal government. In response to the OIA opposition, the Senate Committee on Interior and Insular Affairs amended the bill to read that nothing in the act would qualify the Lumbees for any services provided by the United States for Indian tribes. Since then, the Lumbees have repeatedly tried to gain the benefits denied to them in 1956, but their efforts have been unsuccessful. In 2006, Congress introduced a Lumbee recognition bill, but it was opposed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Eastern Band of the Cherokee, a federally recognized tribe in western North Carolina. Anthropologist Jack Campisi testified in favor of the 2006 bill. In his written testimony before the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, Dr. Campisi stated, quote, "At the time of sustained white contact, there existed a Cheraw Indian community precisely where the Lumbees reside today. A 1725 map made by John Herbert shows the Cheraw tribe between the Pee and Drowning Creek. In 1737, John Thompson purchased land in the same general area from the Cheraw, and in 1754, Governor Arthur Dobbs of North Carolina identified on Drowning Creek, ahead of the head of the Little Pee 50 families of mixed crew or breed on a lawless people filled the lands without patent or paying quit rents, shot a sheriff for coming to view vacant lands being enclosed by great swamps." But Campisi quoted only part of the 1754 report to Governor Arthur Dobbs. The full report reads as follows: Colonel Rutherford's regiment of foot in Bladen County, 441, a troop of horse, a new company necessary to be made at Waccamaw, James Kerr recommended for captain, Drowning Creek on the head of the Little Pee 50 families, a mixed crew of lawless people filled the lands without patent or paying quit rents, shot a surveyor for coming to view vacant lands being enclosed by great swamps. Quakers to attend or pay, as the northern counties' fines are not high enough to oblige the militia to muster. No arms stores or Indian in the county. Campisi drew the following conclusion: it is clear that there was a community of 300 or more individuals on Drowning Creek that held land in common. The most reasonable explanation for its existence, given the lack of white settlement in the area, is that the community consisted of residential tribal members. However, this conclusion is not warranted by the full document. The reference is to a mixed crew of lawless people squatting on the land, not to Cheraw Indians holding land in common. And if anything, the full quotation states that no armed stores or Indian in the county. Also, the 1725 map by John Herbert, the commissioner of Indian trade for the Wino factory on the Black River, shows the Cheraw, that is the Cheraw, settlement along the Pee River, not near Drowning Creek, which, as I said before, was a tributary of the Little Pee River. In addition, Campisi asserted the oldest Lumbee community that can be continuously documented was called Long Swamp, now called Prospect, and located within the core of the Pembroke and Smith townships, the heart of the modern-day Lumbee community. But it is also located right in the heart of the so-called Old Field of the Cheraw, documented in the land records of 1737 and 1739, unquote. However, this doesn't match the documents Campisi cited in the Lumbee petition. In the one dated March 1739, the Welsh residents living southwest of Drowning Creek complained to the South Carolina Council about Cheraw Indians coming to hunt to their land to hunt. The petition was not sent to the North Carolina Council, an indication of the fact that the Indians were coming from South Carolina. In the other document, John Thompson of PD presented two land deeds dated August 1737, in which he bought land from the Cheraw on the northeast and southwest side of the PD River, except for two old fields reserved by the Cheraw. Thus, these two old fields reserved for the Cheraw were in South Carolina, not North Carolina. Campisi dismisses the latter statement by citing a proclamation dated 1753 by Matt Rowan, governor of North Carolina, that sundry people under the pretense of the authority of South Carolina have come into Anson County to survey lands, which he refers to as a frontier to the Indians. The proclamation commanded the military to apprehend these offenders. Campisi concluded, quote, "At the time Drowning Creek formed the boundary between Bladen and Anson counties. Apparently the Indian community was on the Anson side of the river." This conclusion is the inescapable conclusion, said Campisi, was that the community was on Drowning that the community on Drowning Creek was an Indian community. However, this conclusion is either inescapable nor does it follow from the historical evidence. The ancestors of the Lumbees held title to lands in Bladen County, in a region which in 1787 became Robeson County, not Anson County. In addition, the boundary between Anson and Bladen County was the Great Pee River, not Drowning Creek. And this 1775 map by Henry Mooson, based on a 1771 map by James Cook, clearly shows the Cheraw precinct on the west side of the Great Pee River in South Carolina, not along Drowning Creek. In 2010, another bill was introduced in Congress that would have recognized the Lumbee Indians of North Carolina with full benefits and privileges and immunities, except for the right to conduct gaming activities. The bill had the support of the two United States senators from North Carolina, the Democrat Kay Hagan and the Republican Richard Burr, as well as the Democratic congressman from the district that included the home of the Lumbees, Mike McIntyre. The bill was passed by the House of Representatives and the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, and it was reported out to the full Senate. However, meantime, in March 2010, the Lumbee Tribal Council signed a contract with Lewin International, a company based in Nevada that consults on casino operations. The contract provided that Lewin would lobby for the recognition bill, and if Lumbees eventually were permitted to open a casino, Lewin would have the right to develop the property. When the deal was made public, the Lumbees quickly canceled the contract, but it was too late. A group of 5 unnamed senators put a stop to the bill in a procedure by which any senator can threaten a filibuster to pass a bill from passage. Soon after the Lumbee recognition bill was forwarded for a final vote in the United States Senate, a new book was published in the spring of 2010 by the University of North Carolina Press, titled Lumbee Indians in the Jim Crow South, Race, Identity, and the Making of a Nation. Its author, Malinda Lowery, has an undergraduate degree from Harvard, a graduate degree from Stanford, and a PhD from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. She became an associate professor of history at UNC Chapel Hill and the head of the Center of the Study of the American South. In 2020, she left UNC to accept the Calhoun Family Chair in American History at Emory University. She happens to be a Lumbee. In her dissertation, Lowery writes that the forefathers of the Lumbees, who migrated to Robeson County in the 1700s, were Major and John Locklear, Ishmael Chavis, John Brooks, and Charles Oxendine. Quote, evidence indicates that some of these men were members of the Cheraw and Waccamaw groups who lived in and around Robeson County in the second half of the 17th century. But it seems that all of them married Indian women, and their children then founded the community that coalesced in Robeson County. But her so-called evidence are not primary sources, but rather a report to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs in March 1912 and 2 reports commissioned by the Lumbee Regional Development Authority in 1976 and 1987. Lowery argues that according to oral tradition, the ancestors of the Lumbees were Indians from 3 places. 1, the Roanoke River in northeastern North Carolina and southern Virginia. 2, the Piedmont and eastern North Carolina, including the Hatteras, the Tuscarora, and the Saponi. And 3, the Piedmont region south and west of present-day Robeson County, including the Cheraw, Waccamaw, and Petey. She had drawn for her dissertation and book a map showing all of these tribes migrating to Robeson County. However, this map is not a primary source. Lowery acknowledges that some genealogists argue these ancestors of the Lumbees were not Indians, but free blacks. She said they base this view on pre-Civil War records that labeled families with common surnames, but with common Lumbee surnames as mulatto, white, mixed, free Negro, other free, or free colored. But she asserts without any authority that, quote, historians have long established that these labels require context and they are not by themselves reliable indicators of ancestry. Lowery dismisses historical evidence to the contrary found in a published work that she lists in her bibliography of both her dissertation and her book. The book is by genealogist Paul Heinig, titled Free African Americans of North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina from the Colonial Period to about 1820. Heinig compiled relatively complete genealogies of African American families, including the Chavis, Locklear, Lowery, and Oxidine families. His conclusion was, quote, most of the Lumbee Indian families listed in the 1790 and 1800 Robeson County census as other free are traced in this history back to persons referred to as Negroes in Virginia. The earliest memory of the Chavis family, according to Heinig, was Bartholomew Chavis, who was living in Henrico County, Virginia in 1707 when he recorded his cattle mark. In March 1719/20, he received a patent for 300 acres on the north side of the Roanoke River in North Carolina, in what was then Chowan County, later became Bertie County, and then Northampton County. In 1726, he owned over 1,000 acres of land north of the Roanoke and another 630 on the south side of the river. One of Bartholomew Chavis's sons seemed to have been Jacob Chavis, born circa 1710. In May 1735, Chavis was granted 100 acres in Bladen Precinct, east of present-day Fayetteville, near Locks Creek and the Cape Fear River. Bartholomew, in 1727, granted his other son, William Chavis, land in Bertie County, which later became Edgecombe County. He was listed in 1742 as owning 15 blacks. It is of note that here we have an example of a free black person owning slaves. Edgecombe, which later became part of Granville County, and Chavis was mentioned there in a 1753 court case as the owner of a lodging house in which a lodger had had some money stolen. When the lodger asked Chavis if he to help search for the money, Chavis was reported as saying, quote, I am a black man and don't care to undertake such a thing, unquote. It is of note that Chavis referred to himself here as a black man, putting to rest the Malinda Lowery's argument that this was a matter of identification by outsiders versus self-identification. The Oxidine family traces back to John Oxidine, known as Thigro, who successfully sued for his freedom in Northumberland County, Virginia, in January 1723. In 1755, he moved to Bladen County, North Carolina, where he was living on the east side of Drowning Creek. Charles Oxidine, probably the son of John Oxidine, obtained a patent to 150 acres northeast of Drowning Creek in 1767. He is listed as a mixed blood taxable in Bladen County from 1766 to 1768, and a mulatto taxable in 1770 and 1771. Charles Oxidine's son, John Oxidine, married Margaret Maynor, who, quote, was probably the daughter of John Maynor, head of a Sampson County household of an, quote, other free person in the 1790 census. The earliest record of the Lowery family was in October 1767, when James Lowery was granted a patent for land in Bladen County. Between 1770 and 1772, he bought more than 1,000 acres in the county. He was listed with his wife as taxable mulattoes from 1768 to 1774. In 1779, he owned 2 slaves, 400 acres of improved land, and 100 head of cattle. By the time of his death in 1810, James Lowery owned more than 1,000 acres and 9 slaves. He was described by older white residents who remembered him as, quote, well-proportioned, fine-looking, respectable mulatto, characterized by elegance and refinement of manners, tall and commanding in personal appearance, urban, courtly, and genteel, unquote. He was married to Sarah Kersey, who was descended from Peter Kersey, a taxable Negro in the household of William Hunt of Surry County, Virginia. The Locklear family also originated in Virginia. They were early residents of Lunenburg County, Virginia, and Edgecombe County, North Carolina. In the 1730s, the Locklear family and the Chavis family lived in Edgecombe County. In 1770, William Chavis of Granville County charged Thomas Locklear, Lowery, listed as a free Negro, with trespass. Robert Locklear purchased a plantation in Edgecombe County in North Carolina in December 1738. His son, John Locklear, bought 100 acres on the south side of Gum Swamp and Drowning Creek in 1752. He and his wife were listed as mulattoes in Bladen County in 1768. Another son of Robert Locklear was Major Locklear, who was living in Bladen County in October 1773 when he was accused of harboring, quote, free Negroes and mulattoes living upon the king's land, including Edward and Teely Locklear, his 2 children. According to the 1860 census, Robeson County was second only to New Hanover County, which included valuable town property in Wilmington, in the value of property owned by free Negroes. In the 1860 census, the free Negroes in Robeson County owning property valued at more than $2,500 included Wiley Locklear, George Dial, and James Oxidine. Others decided to leave North Carolina for other places. In 1857, Henry Chavers emigrated to Liberia, which was founded as a homeland for American free blacks by the American Colonization Society. Hennig's genealogical history, therefore, is a remarkable story of free African Americans who owned extensive tracts of land and even slaves in colonial North Carolina. During the Civil War, the Lumbees acted as and were treated as though they were free blacks. They were assigned to build fortifications in Fort Fisher at the mouth of the Cape Fear River, which the Union forces wanted to secure in order to stop Confederate blockade runners. They were also suspect of aiding Northern prisoners of war and Union troops. In 1864, a wealthy planter named James P. Barnes accused the sons of Allen Lowery of stealing and butchering 2 of his best hogs, allegedly to feed escaped Union prisoners. On December 21st, 1864, Barnes was shot on his way to the Clay Valley Post Office, where he was the postmaster. He lived long enough to accuse William and his son Henry Berry Lowery of the shooting. There had been a feud between the Lowery family and a member of the Home Guard named James Brantley Harris. The Home Guard was a statewide militia established by the North Carolina Assembly during the Civil War in July 1863. and it consisted of white males between the age of 18 and 50 who were exempt from Confederate military service. Harris and the Home Guard attempted to arrest two of the Lowery brothers on charges of desertion, and in the process, Harris killed the two Lowrys. On January 15th, 1865, Harris himself was killed allegedly by Henry Berry Lowery. In March, the Home Guard, under Captain Hugh McGregor, arrested Allen Lowery, his wife, and three of their sons, Calvin, Sinclair, and William, and their neighbor, George Dial. The Lowery women were locked in a smokehouse, and the men kept outside for questioning. The guard accused the Lowerys of highway robbery and of aiding Union prisoners and Confederate deserters and avoiding service building fortifications outside of Wilmington. William Lowery tried to escape, but he was shot and returned to the smokehouse. And then the Home Guard picked a jury from among their ranks and tried their captives on the spot. Allen and his son William were found guilty, and they were taken back to the home place where they were executed by a firing squad. Henry Berry Lowery, the surviving son, organized a band of outlaws that took revenge on the murderers of his father and brother. Alfred Townsend, a reporter for the New York Herald, wrote that, quote, "The Lowerys were industrious carpenters whose handiwork was seen in Lumberton, Schuylkill, and around the region. The whites hated the settlement because it was a bad example to the Negroes," unquote. Townsend described the outlaw chief, Henry Berry Lowery, as, quote, "a yellow fellow, Indian-looking, of mixed Tuscarora, mulatto, and white blood, who had straight black hair like an Indian," unquote. This was one of the first references to a Lowery as possibly having Indian ancestry. But it may be simply that the Lowerys were adopting an Indian identity to distinguish themselves from African Americans. According to Townsend, Lowery was, quote, "one of the handsomest mulattoes you ever saw." And Townsend concluded that the Lowerys and their blood relatives showed Indian traces, while Scuffletown at large is mainly plain, unromantic mulatto, unquote. Scuffletown was the name used by whites for the area where most of the Lumbees lived. Townsend said of Henry Berry Lowery, quote, "There is not probably a Negro in Scuffletown who would betray him, and his prowess is a household word in every black family in Seaboard Carolina." Townsend was the creator of the legendary image of Lowery as a type of Robin Hood or Rob Roy. In 1872, he published a book titled The Swamp Outlaws, or The Lowery Bandits of North Carolina, being a complete history of the modern-day Rob Roys or Robin Hoods. Additional feats were added to the legend of Henry Berry Lowery. It was said that he was captured several times by the Confederate Home Guard, but he was always able to escape. It was also said that the Lowery gang raided the wealthy, whom they always treated their victims with respect and shared their plunder with the poor. At the end of the war, a reward of $12,000 was offered to anyone who could capture or kill Henry Berry Lowery, but he was neither captured nor heard of after 1872. Whatever his fate, writes historian Christopher Oakley, Henry Berry Lowery became a folk hero, the great Indian Robin Hood of North Carolina, who sparked fear in wealthy and white landowners and made the local authorities appear foolish. In 1867, an agent for the Freedmen's Bureau investigated these events. Two ministers named John H. Coble and Reverend Luther McKinnon defended the actions of Robert Lowery and the Home Guard, but said that the Lowerys had always claimed to be Indians and disdained the idea that any of them were connected with the African American race. However, by aiding Union troops and prisoners of war fighting against the Home Guard, the Lowerys were acting more as free blacks rather than Native Americans. Unlike the Lumbees, the Cherokee were divided over the Civil War. Some Cherokee owned slaves, yet others in the Indian Territory of Oklahoma sided with and fought for the Union. After an initial position of neutrality, the Cherokee chief John Ross signed a treaty of alliance with the Confederacy. In North Carolina, William Holland Thomas, the so-called white chief and Indian agent of the Cherokee, who happened to be a cousin of the Confederate President Jefferson Davis, organized the Thomas Legion, which included 400 Cherokee in his Cherokee Battalion. They fought under the Confederate General Jubal Early in the Shenandoah Valley Campaign. This is the end of part 1.